14 أذار حتى نحقق الحرية التي ننشدها جميعا.
Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, March 26th. I'm Yumna Naufal, and these are today's headlines. UN Special Coordinator for Lebanon, Derek Plumley, calls on political leaders to discuss ways to reach consensus after Prime Minister Najib Mikati's resignation. The Arab League kicks off a two-day summit in Doha, where opponents of President Bashar al-Assad are representing Syria for the first time. And after President Obama's Middle East visit, UN Special Coordinator of the Middle East peace process, Robert Sari, calls for fresh diplomatic efforts between Israel and the Palestinian territories. The UN Special Coordinator for Lebanon, Derek Plumley, is calling on political leaders to discuss ways to reach consensus after Prime Minister Najib Mikati's resignation last week. Plumley said UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is stressing on the importance of the Lebanese to work with state institutions to maintain calm and stability. He also mentioned the importance of respecting Lebanon's policy of dissociation and supporting security forces. Plumley added the UN will continue to support preparations for the parliamentary elections that are set to be held in June. He told reporters that he and Prime Minister Mikati discussed other pressing challenges, such as the UNIFIL's operations, the increasing number of Syrian refugees in Lebanon, among others. Future Parliamentary Bloc MP Samir Jusser says Lebanese lawmakers should adhere to constitutional norms while naming the Prime Minister-designate rather than holding a national dialogue session to form a new cabinet. Lebanese Forces leader Samir Jaja echoed a similar stance, saying cross-party talks should be held to form a new government right away. Jusser voiced his party's willingness to attend a national dialogue session. But political sources speculate the session could be held later on this week. On another note, Speaker Nabih Berri held talks on with several officials from March 8 and 14 to resolve the crisis and the issue of adopting a new electoral law. The Russian Foreign Ministry says Moscow favors a solution to local Lebanese challenges through national dialogue. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman Alexander Lukashevich said democratic and security institutions could help the country overcome its local challenges peacefully. He reiterated that Russia backs a sovereign, independent, and united Lebanon. Lukashevich accused the armed Syrian opposition and its supporters in Lebanon of transferring arms and helping the infiltration of gunmen across the Lebanese-Syrian border. On the other hand, he praised the role of the Lebanese army of preventing gunmen from entering the country. The families of the 9 pilgrims abducted in Aleppo, Syria, threatened to escalate their measures in the beginning of April if the case isn't resolved. Protesters held banners criticizing Lebanese authorities for failing to release the men. They held a protest near the Arab Justice Minister's headquarters in Sami Sulh before briefly blocking the road near the Justice Palace and causing traffic. Well, officials are calling on them to end the crisis and upon their return to Lebanon. 11 Lebanese pilgrims were kidnapped, just to remind you, in Aleppo back in May 2012 as they were making their way back to Lebanon by land from pilgrimage in Iran. 2 of the kidnapped pilgrims, Awad Ibrahim and Hussein Ali Omar, were released in past months. During the Arab League summit in Doha, President Sulaiman asked Turkey to exert more efforts in releasing them. The U.S. administration will appoint U.S. Middle East envoy David Hale as Washington's ambassador to Lebanon. Reports in Al Hayat Daily say Hale will replace current ambassador Maura Conley when her term ends this year. Hale was Deputy Chief of Mission at the United States Embassy in Beirut when David Satterfield was the U.S. Ambassador from 1998 to 2001. He served as U.S. Ambassador to Jordan from 2005 to 2008 and held the post of Deputy Special Envoy for Middle East Peace under former Senator George Mitchell. The Arab League has kicked off a two-day summit in Doha where opponents of President Bashar al-Assad are representing Syria for the first time. The Emir of Qatar, Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, opened the conference by inviting the Syrian National Coalition, Muaz al-Khatib, to take Syria's seat. He told the audience of kings, emirs, and presidents that he supports a political solution to the crisis in Syria. Khatib demanded to represent Syria at the United Nations. He also insisted that Syria's future should not be determined by foreign powers, adding only the Syrian people should choose their leaders. Forces loyal to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad have seized Bab al-Umr in the central city of Homs 2 weeks after clashes erupted over the area. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says opposition activists. United Nations Special Coordinator of the Middle East Peace Process, Robert Seri, called for fresh diplomatic efforts between Israel and the Palestinian territories. He added the United States President Barack Obama's visit to Middle East offers important opportunities for fresh peace talks.
The visit by President Obama to the region last week marks an important opportunity to reinvigorate efforts towards a two-state solution. President Obama met with leaders on both sides. He also visited His Majesty King Abdullah of Jordan, who has been central to recent dialogue initiatives. In a direct follow-up to the visit, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry met with President Abbas in Amman and returned to Jerusalem to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu. The United Nations welcomes continued U.S. commitment to the peace process, and we appreciate President Obama's strong reaffirmation of the two-state solution as necessary, just and possible in his speech on 21 March, where he called for an independent, viable Palestine while emphasizing Israelis' right to insist upon their security. The US President also reminded that he had earlier suggested principles on territory and security that he believed can be the basis for talks, and called for Arab states to take steps towards normalized relations with Israel.
Egyptian authorities have proceeded with the extradition of 2 former regime officials to Libya wanted on charges of corruption. Former Libyan ambassador Ali Maria and Mohammed Ibrahim, the brother of senior Gaddafi-era official Ahmed Ibrahim, were arrested in Cairo on March 19th, along with Muammar Gaddafi's cousin Ahmed Gaddafi Addam. The 2 men were taken to Cairo's airport, where they were handed over to a Libyan official. The Libyan prosecutor spokesman Taha Bara told reporters that Tripoli had issued an international arrest warrant for Gaddafi Addam for forging documents, while the other 2 were wanted for financial crimes. And 2 Iraqi officials were killed and another one badly wounded when a powerful bomb tore through an armored car near a disputed town north of Baghdad. Mayor Shala Abdul, Council Chief Abdul Qadir Naimi, and Salahuddin Provincial Councillor Rashid Khurshid had been traveling together to inspect a road paving project north of the town when the bomb went off close to their armored car. Naimi and Khurshid, both candidates in provincial elections due to be held on April 20th, were killed, and Abdul was badly wounded and transported to a hospital in the Kurdish city of Sulaymaniyah. And now for news around the world in brief. Kidnappers released a Norwegian woman and an Israeli man held in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula for 4 days following negotiations led by Bedouins. Security sources said the tourist, Israeli citizen Amir Hassan, and Norwegian Ilji Phillips had been kidnapped on Friday while driving between the resort towns of Dahab and Taba on the Red Sea coast. They said the kidnappers' aim was to put pressure on the authorities to release 2 of the relatives held for drug dealing. Protesters have marched near the presidential palace in Cyprus, while Bank of Cyprus chairman Andreas Artemis had submitted his resignation. Artemis resigned to protest plans to restructure the bank, one of the largest in the country. As banks remain closed nationwide for the 2nd week, an estimated 1,500 protesters gathered in the capital, Nicosia, to denounce the European Union, European Central Bank, and the International Monetary Fund's creditors. Italy's top court overturns the 2011 acquittal of American student Amanda Knox and former boyfriend Rafael Solicito for the murder of Britain Meredith Kircher and ordered a retrial. Prosecutors accused Knox and Solicito of killing Kircher in 2007 during a drug-fueled sexual assault. They were initially found guilty and sentenced to 26 and 25 years in prison. But in 2011, their convictions were overturned after forensic investigators challenged police scientific evidence, saying there had been multiple errors in the investigation. Knox and Solicito were released after serving 4 years in prison. And China calls on restraints from all sides on the Korean peninsula. This comes after North Korea orders its strategic rocket and long-range artillery units to be combat-ready to target U.S. military bases on Guam, Hawaii, and mainland America. The order, issued in a statement from the North's Military Supreme Command, marks the latest fiery rhetoric from Pyongyang since the start of joint military drills by U.S. and South Korean forces earlier this month. And Taliban suicide bombers kill at least 5 policemen in eastern Afghanistan in a 3-hour attack that coincided with a visit to the country by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. Officials say 3 insurgents detonated their suicide vest and their car packed with explosives. 5 of them wearing foreigners' uniforms have been shot dead. The attackers, who were armed with rocket-propelled grenades and light machine guns, clashed with Afghani security forces. The attack wounded 6 civilians. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has made a show of unity with Afghani President Hamid Karzai during a short visit to Afghanistan yesterday, following weeks of heightened tensions between the two countries. Kerry and Karzai discussed a host of issues, including attempts to stabilize the country before most foreign troops leave by the end of 2014. And the transfer of security responsibility to Afghani forces begins. Kerry also paid tribute to Afghani women entrepreneurs as the country prepares to be on its own when the foreign forces leave next year.
I'm confident that the President absolutely does not believe the United States has any interest except to see the Taliban come to the table to make peace, and that we are completely cooperative with the government of Afghanistan with respect to the protection of their interests and their people. The United States, as of today, we don't have prisoners. Whatever is occurring here is under the control of the Afghan people, and the United States will cooperate with the government of Afghanistan.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Let me remind you of our top stories. UN Special Coordinator for Lebanon, Derek Plumley, calls on political leaders to discuss ways to reach consensus after Prime Minister Najib Mikati's resignation. The Arab League kicks off a 2-day summit in Doha, where opponents of President Bashar al-Assad are representing Syria for the first time. And after President Obama's Middle East visit, UN Special Coordinator of the Middle East peace process, Robert Sari, calls for fresh diplomatic efforts between Israel and the Palestinian territories. Those are your Tuesday headlines live on Future Television in Beirut. I'm Yumna Naufal. Noor Ael joins you tomorrow at 4:20 for all the latest.
14 أذار حتى نحقق الحرية التي ننشدها جميعا.